Hi all, Kybermon here with Core Rules Review number 8, the official Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. Alright, so where do I begin? First of all, this is not a comprehensive review at all. I'm going to touch on what's in this book and things I find interesting about it and usable in almost any role-playing game or for inspiration. And because chances are you have a system that already works for you, I'm going to skip over the specifics in favor of ideas that Gary Gygax had that are still really relevant to the games you're running today. And that it breaks tradition, but this the ideas here matter a lot. The themes here are advice, suggestions, charts, tables, and various info for running the game. My big complaint, though, is much of the content is squeezed into paragraphs when a table or a chart would suffice. My high praise, though, is this is written by the original Dungeon Master, Gary Gygax. You can see his thoughts and inspirations in a muddled but fun way. There's some comics in here that really add to the sense of fun that D&D is intended to be even during simulation gameplay. So it's not purely simulationist. It's not purely fun necessarily. Gary tried to build a game system that was adaptable. He even references Gamma World in here, and there's you can when you look at Appendix N, you get a lot of his ideas for the source material. In fact, it's because of this book, not this one specifically, but the older cover with the red guy on front, that I discovered my favorite author, Andre Norton, and this is a compilation of kind of things in her world. Andre Norton is the first female that was inducted into the Grand Masters of Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame, I believe. She went by Andre Norton because she wrote as a man, and in order to prove who she was, she had to legally change her name. And that was because of the period of time that she lived in. She died in 2005. Let's get back to Gary. Sorry. I love the way she writes, and you can see in a lot of science fiction and fantasy influences that she really instilled on the work. Like, there's a beautiful amount of flavor that she contributed. And she has a book called Quag Keep that's actually one of her story version of an adventure she ran in Dungeons and Dragons. So I think that's incredibly cool. So let me continue with this review. Sorry. The key points are ability score generation on page 11. And then it even shows the bell curve and things like that on the page after that. So let's go to 11. I don't know, the page before that. See, there's the bell curve of 3d6 versus the linear notation. And then over here you have ability score generation. I'm not going to do that for every page. Secondary skills table on 12. Age, disease, and dying. That's a category. That goes from page 12 to 15. Races are on 15 and 16. Classes are on 16 to 21. Monsters as player characters on 21 to 23. And this is important because this is kind of cool. So basically, when your players, sorry, want to play a monster, here's some advice, and he's giving reasons why he didn't include it. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is unquestionably human centric, with demi humans, semi humans, and humanoids in various orbits around the sun of humanity. Men are the worst monsters, particularly high level characters such as clerics, fighters, and magic users, whether singly in small groups or large companies. So basically, humanity in Dungeons and Dragons is the species that is capable of the furthest growth and development and evolution. And that's how it's intended to be. That's why you get a small group of people to kill dragons, demons, undead. Like, humanity is the apex predator of Dungeons and Dragons. And that's shown through the player characters. It's fascinating insight. But he goes basically into why you should balance out, and eventually a more mature player will realize how key and human centric people are. And it's just, we understand things from our perspective, and we are all humans when it comes down to it. And I can understand where he's coming from, because it's so hard to have a literal original thought. And that is why humans are the apex predators. We take things that we see and we adapt it. Like, if we were a caveman seeing an otter use a rock to bash open a clamshell, we would mimic that. And we would master it to a degree where we would invent technology that does that. Alignment on 23 to 25. Money on 25 to 26. Okay, so in the money section, okay, there it is. Player character expenses. Value and reputed properties of gems and jewelry. Increase or decrease of worth beyond base value of gems and jewelry, basically. Key to gem properties. Ornamental stones, semi-precious stones, fancy stones, gemstones, jewelry. Reputed magical properties of gems. Value of other rare commodities. Types of armor. And then, I guess that was its own section. So, hirelings on 28 to 34 and 239. Okay, so the hireling section, standard hireling table of daily and monthly costs. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 standard types of hirelings, ranging from a porter to a carpenter, leather worker, lemner, link boy, mason, pack handler, tailor, teamster, and valet or lackey. Then you have expert hirelings, and those are alchemists, armorers, blacksmiths, engineers, jewelers, soldiers, sages, scribes, ship crew, shipmaster, spy, steward, and weapon makers. And there are a few types of engineers. There's many different types of soldiers. And It's really amazing how much work went into this. And then you have the different races, like Dwarven Smiths and Gnome Smiths, and there's a lot that went into this. Um, the henchmen on 34 and 37, or 34 to 37. Like, here's an example of some of the art. Like, they dress up as mice. That's hilarious. I love it. Another example of the art. Somebody get that barbarian a drink. But henchmen are basically NPC variants of player characters. Time is considered like how you spend time in the game on 37 to 38. Character spells on 38 to 47. Land adventure on 47 to 49. Air adventures on 49 to 53. Waterborne adventures on 53 to 55. Underwater adventures on 55 to 57. Travel in the known planes on 57 to 58. Outdoor movement on 58. Adventuring advice on 59 to 60, which includes like invisibility and infrared vision, things like that. Combat is by far one of the larger sections, 61 to 84. Experience, 84 to 86. And let me go ahead and show you 84 to 86, the experience section. Okay. Experience. Covering the division of experience, experience value of treasure taken, experience points value of monsters, gaining experience levels, and then let's see, the campaign on 86 to 100, NPCs on 100 through 106, and 237 to 238, construction and siege on 106 to 110, conducting the game, so game mastering advice on 110 to 114, magical research on 114 to 118. And so in conducting the game, they also referenced Gamma World, which is pretty cool because Gamma World was one of those first dips into sci-fi, really, as far as I'm aware of in the gaming space. That's in running the game, though. So there's really that level of science fantasy going on in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons from the beginning. Like, it's not intended to be entirely like Tolkien. Magical research, creation of holy or unholy water. Spell research. Fabrication of magic items, including potions and scrolls. Manufacture of potions. Suggested special ingredients for potions. Manufacture of scrolls. Curse scrolls. Fabrication of other magic items. Fabrication of magic items by illusionists. Fabrication of magic items by charmed or enslaved magic users. Non-standard magic items. Use of magic items. Command words, crystal balls and scrying, drinking potions, applying oils, potion miscibility, energy draining by undead or device. Yeah, there's a lot of information here. Treasure is on 120 through 169. Once again, a massive section. It begins with random tables and just it goes on and on and on with all sorts of stuff. Roll here, look at this, like unending, it feels like. And let's see. Yeah, just there's a lot of information here. The appendices on 169 to 227. Appendix A, random dungeon generation. Appendix B, random wilderness terrain. Appendix C, random monster encounters. I'm still flipping through Appendix C, by the way. Appendix D, creatures from the lower planes. Appendix E, alphabetical monster listing. Appendix F, gambling. Appendix G, traps. Appendix H, tricks. Appendix I, dungeon dressing. Appendix J, herbs, spices, etc. Appendix K, describing magical substances. Appendix L, conjured animals. Appendix M, summoned monsters. Appendix N, inspirational reading, which is where I discovered Andre Norton. Appendix O, encumbrance of standard items. Appendix B, creating a party. And then you have the glossary after Appendix B. So the glossary runs from 227 to 230. The index from 231 to 235. Encumbrance is on 239. Morale is on 240. And that is the official Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. There is a lot of information in there. And the vast majority of which, it's not laid out in any sort of logical or rational way. There's not sections, there's carryover. It's a clustered mess of just goodness. And the usability of it is so limited in game because of the divide and the way they have it laid out. It has inspired everything we touch today in our hobby. This is by far one of the most amazing things that people have come to recognize. I cherish it. The reason why I was flipping through this one and not the classic red guy with the 3 adventurers and the City of Brass on the back is because, and by the way, the quote in this book that references the cover art is still there with that description in this version. But the reason why I pulled up the orange side version, which is a reprinting of that material instead of the original, is because I want to keep that original material as good as possible. I don't want it to be overused, especially that to me is invaluable. That's why I got this second book. The book means something to me, and honestly, I don't know how to properly cover it or give it the justice it deserves. I don't want to spoil too many things for you. If you can find a copy of this book. I suggest getting it if you're a collector or if you are curious as to where this material started. If you are ungrateful for how easy 5th edition is, get this, okay? Um, it This book has inspired me to do things because of the way I see them in here. It's not a perfect book, but it was done with a lot of love, and I appreciate what it is and what it means to our gaming community. Um, and I really think all game masters should have a copy of it and at least dedicate one day a year to flip through it, because you wouldn't have simpler games if it weren't for games like this and my first core rules review, Universe, the 2nd edition. And like, you see how confounding these materials are, and you're like, how do I use this? And it's so jumbled that I'm glad we got the people we have now to fix it. So when you see something you can make better, don't hate on other people for trying to come up with reinventing the wheel, because that's why we have 5th edition. That's why it's easier to run. That's why the math makes more sense to more people. That's why you have the transition from Pathfinder 1st edition to 5th edition in the Matt Mercer crew. Because when things are easier to run, it becomes more natural flow. And not everything should be easy for the sake of being easy. You know, the people that came before us, the grognards, if you will, they had to deal with the confines of a system that wasn't easy, and everybody was just kind of willy-nillying parts of what they believed worked in certain ways, only to find out later that that's not the original intent. And, you know, Gary Gygax says dungeon masters are created equally, basically, because you are the master of your campaign and your campaign setting. These pre-published campaign settings like Forgotten Realms or Dark Sun or Eberron, they didn't exist in the origin of the hobby. The origin of the hobby, you took your ideas, you built your world, and you were the master. You were the dungeon master. And your say was final. And that is something sorely missing from newer versions. There are cherished ideas in here that you do not get just by switching editions. If you're switching editions because something is new, just remember how badly 4th edition was looked at. I mean, 4th edition might have been a decent game, right? If it weren't Dungeons and Dragons. And that's my point. Because when you strip something and alter it, you don't really call it the same thing if it's missing the spirit. And everything had a natural balance to this that you don't appreciate if you're trying to min-max. This game wasn't about min-maxing, and the easiest way to run something like this, I would say it would be Dungeon Crawl Classics. from what I've seen so far. Um, the idea that your characters could fail at casting a spell and it used up that slot. You don't have unlimited cantrips. Time, money, effort. That's how you got things in this old edition. Nothing was handed to you. Many of the spells we still have today, like Mel's Acid Arrow, that came across because of Gary and his son playing. And just please, everybody, take the time to appreciate this. All right, Kyber out.